Good evening and welcome to Decision Point. I'm Ben Swan. If you've been with us for the past few weeks, you know that we're in the midst of a series talking with Holocaust survivors who live here today in El Paso. So far, we've spoken with two, and tonight, the third. David Kaplan has lived here in El Paso for many years, but he was born and grew up in Lithuania. While he was a young child, he endured the Holocaust while living in that country. We asked David to come on the show and to share his story with us, and he explained that because it's been so many years since that time, he has difficulty today remembering all the details of his story. But he also told us a few years ago he was a guest speaker at UTEP. At that time, he sat before a class and he shared many of his stories and experiences during the Holocaust, how he survived that time in his life. That speech was also recorded, and he asked us tonight to use that video. We agreed. Again, David Kaplan has lived in El Paso for many years, but his story begins in Lithuania, where he says the people of his home country were more feared by the Jewish people than the Germans were. Tonight, David Kaplan's story in his own words.
Okay, Lithuania was an independent country. It was occupied by the Russians in 1940. And my father was a tailor. He had about 8 workers, and they made a nice living. They used to sell the clothing on credit, and it was very comfortable. And then the Russians, when they occupied, they took my father away because he was a bourgeois, which is a rich man. He was not a rich man. They sent him to Siberia. And then, a year later, the Germans occupied Lithuania. And there starts all the trouble. I was only 12 years old, believe it or not. And the Germans, before they got in, the Lithuanian underground movement tried to push out the Russians from Lithuania. But after they pushed them out, they had nothing what to do. They started to kill Jewish people. All the Jewish people was the victim. And the first couple days, they killed about 10,000 people. Innocent, there was a small section. But the slums, I think, more or less. My grandparents were laborers. My grandfather was a bricklayer. He used to paint houses, hardly made a living. This section was all the poor people. And they got in and they killed like flies everybody, 10,000. Lithuania
This is when the Germans came in?
Yeah, before the Germans came in.
Oh, so the Russians killed?
No, the Lithuanian took over. The Lithuanian took over before they threw out the Russians, and the Germans didn't occupy yet. Then they started to kill the Jews.
Okay, and what year was this?
This was in 1941.
And what was the population of the Jewish people?
365,000 the population.
In Lithuania?
Lithuania, all Lithuania.
And you were in Kovno?
I was in Kovno. The Kovno was then the capital of Lithuania. And we lived by the railroad station. And they got into our house and they took my brother. My brother was 4 years old, I was 16. And they took him to work, to clean the blood of the dead soldiers, the Russian dead soldiers. And we were afraid they will never come back because they used to kill him before they let him go. But my brother survived and he came back home.
So now these Germans, when they came in, they killed about 10,000
I'm talking
Jews.
about Lithuanian people did.
Oh, so these are the neighbors?
Our neighbors are, you love your neighbor, you know, this is what happened there. They loved so much that they killed them.
So the Lithuanians killed the Jews before the Germans came in?
Exactly. And because Jewish people believe a little bit different than the Christians, you know, we don't believe in Jesus Christ, you see. The rest, we believe in everything. And they killed about 10,000. And then the Germans came in, and they didn't kill so much in the beginning, but they put in the newspaper that all the Jews have to move from Kaunas, from the city, to a small town where they killed the 10,000 Jewish people. It's Slabotka, they call it. It's by the Lithuania, between the 2 rivers, Niemen and Lavia, but they call it Nierus in Lithuanian language. And there is the town, and they told us that we can exchange houses with Lithuanians, change houses, and we can move in there in Slobodka. We had a nice house, comfortable house. My father built it in 1936, which is before the war. And we exchanged this house for somebody who had only one room, because there was not a lot of space to live. And our organization, then they formed a police force, a Jewish police force. They formed a Jewish labor organization. Everything was. And they made the Jewish people wear a yellow Magen David star. In front, yellow, in the back. And everybody was forced to wear, otherwise they kill you. And not to walk on the sidewalk, but walk in the street. Because Jewish people are not human for them. And they gave us 18 days to move.
How old were you at this point?
I was 12 years old. Confused, I didn't know what to do. I had a brother who was 4 years older, and a sister was 2 years older than I am. And everybody worried about, But things would happen so slowly, they didn't feel the difference till to the point where we find out we are in trouble. They put chicken wires around this small section, and we had one room only. There was me, my mother, my brother and sister, and I had a grandfather who was seen already. My father was sent to Siberia. They took my father away, which I didn't mind. I was not crazy about my father. He was alcoholic. He used to beat me up and beat up my mother. When they took him away, I hate to say it, I was happy. You imagine how bad he was. But after the war, he came back. I forgave him, and let's talk. Let's keep on talking more. And we went to the ghetto. There we got a room. Water was not inside. We have to go outside for water. The restroom was outside. And Lithuania gets sometimes up to 40 below zero. It was cold. And you have to, middle of the night, you have to get out to the restroom, which is imagine how it feels. And our organization, there was a doctor, was the head of the Jewish people. He complained there's not enough space, and they told him, don't worry about it, there'll be a lot of space. But 3 months later, the army came in, they separated the ghetto in half. One side they sent it to a section where they call it the ninth, I think what do you call it, ninth fort, no, yeah, the ninth fort, and they killed them, half of them. Then we had enough space. But we didn't know about till later we find out, because there was no radio, there was no television, there was not invented with television then. And radio, very few people had a radio.
But part of the strategy of the Germans was to keep you without no news, right?
Yeah.
So nobody knew what was going on.
Nobody knew nothing was going on. And one time we saw some new people coming in on the street to the gates. And they asked us, hey, where is Kaunas? I said, here's Kaunas. And everybody said, and they walked because they promised them from Austria, they're going to arrive in Kaunas ghetto. But instead of taking to our place, they sent the same place where they took the half of the Jewish population of Kaunas, and they killed them there. That's sad. Then, short time later, they told us again to go to a specific place. Everybody, we're gonna do something. They didn't tell us what they're gonna do. And again, the same thing, they separate. The people can work, or people cannot work. And people was not able to work, they sent them again the same place, but we didn't know about it. Everything was secret. And when they separate us, my mother and my grandfather put in the left side, and me and my brother and my sister put in the right side. And I able to, and I knew there was trouble. Then I went back to the German and said, please, my mother, she's a hard-working lady. She's smart. And he was nice enough to let her go back in our group. I don't know how I did it, but I managed. And after a while, again, half of the population, they sent away to kill. And there was not too many left. Food, they give us more or less about 100 grams, which is 4 ounces of bread a day, and some vegetables. We used to make soup. But in ghetto, families were together. They were not separated, like in concentration camp, because I was in 3 different kind of places. In ghetto, and half a concentration camp, and then concentration camp. The first one was Kaunas ghetto, the second was Sunshine, and the third one was Dachau. And I was now in ghetto. That was what I'm telling you about.
Let me ask you a question, David. You said there were about 365,000 Jews in Lithuania at that point. After the war, how many were left?
See, let me there was in Vilnius. In Vilnius was some Jewish people which they had their own ghetto. Shaula had their own ghetto. And the small towns, they put them in the synagogues and burned it. They killed them. Small towns, but they had not too many Jews. It's too much trouble for them to take them to our ghetto, and they killed them there.
So how many were left after the war?
I know, I went to the Dead March, you know. From 10,000, we were 800 survived. But I think it survived maybe by 50,000, I think, altogether, I think so. They're not alive no more, most of them. And things became very bad in ghetto. Then my mother and my brother, my sister decided, they said they're going to open up a new concentration camp. And we were afraid that something going to happen in this ghetto again. Then we signed up. And they took us to a concentration camp which men are separate and women are separate. And children.
Before you get to that place, tell us a little bit about, once you're in the ghetto, you had to set up your life there because you moved from your house over to one room.
Okay, yeah, I know what I'm talking about. You know, everybody who lived in this ghetto, they make us go to work on the airport. I was only 12 years old. I didn't have to go to work. But there was not enough food. Then there was a guy who used to make rings of very small amount of gold. And he was a very fine jeweler. And he told me, he said, why you don't go use my name and go work for my name, and I will able to make jewelry, and I'll give half a loaf of bread. I said, sounds good. Then I used to go, I had this card, there was no pictures, and I said, it's my name. I was no more David Kaplan, but I was already disguised in Grimberg, I think his name was. And I went to work in the airport. Yes, sir.
Do you remember his name?
I think Grimberg. I'm not sure exactly. You know, it's hard to remember. It's too many years. And this jeweler, he was selling in the black market rings and different kind of things made of gold, but very, I think it was 2% or 3% gold. And I went there to work from 7 in the morning till 8 o'clock at night. Sometimes used to rain, and there was no clothing to cover up because it's raining. It was miserable.
So you went and worked at the airport instead of him?
Yeah.
So you took his place, and then he gave you bread, so he didn't have to
Let's
go to
call
the
it like surrogate or something like this.
And your mother also?
My mother worked in the airport, and my sister worked in the airport. I had a brother who got sick, He was a good-looking guy, 4 years older than me, and he got this sickness, myocarditis, which is very often happen to young boys or girls. The heart infects you outside the heart, and this is a disaster. And he needs sulfur to take care of him. But every time it got worse and worse, they were able to work. And I'll say later what happened to him. See, what happened in ghetto, I was 12 years old, I got a little bit older, and girls started to look good to me. And around the corner, there was 3, 4 girls talking to each other, and nice, and they looked so beautiful, and I became a friend of them. At night, we had a curfew at 9 o'clock. And there was no watches, you know, they took away everything. Then I think I was 10 minutes late, and I walked, nobody was in the street, and I heard Lithuanian language, stop. And there was a Lithuanian policeman with a gun, with everything. He said, what you doing here? You know it's a curfew? I said, I'm sorry, I don't have a watch, I made a mistake, I'm sorry. He called the policeman, the Jewish policeman called him, and everybody knew me because where we lived was the labor department, the police department, and we lived upstairs. And everybody knew me there because I was a young boy, and I have nothing but to do, then they knew me. My name was Dotke then. I said, Dotke, what you doing here? I said, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Meantime, he talks to me, the policeman said, put him in jail for 24 hours. Meantime, the Lithuanian policeman heard something by the gate. He said, stop somebody. And they start, the policeman tells me, the Jewish police, that they wait here, and they start to run. He knew I will not run away because they knew me. Meantime, I see this guy what they're running after, because he was a smuggler. He was a black, he used to bring over things from the outside the ghetto. And he dropped something. And then if they find you with something, they kill you right away. When they went after him, this guy dropped something. I picked up, put in my shirt. And I lived maybe about half a block away. I ran up to my house, my apartment, my room, and I put it under the mattress and I said, my mother, don't touch it, I'll be back. I come back, like nothing happened. And this guy, they didn't find nothing with him. They didn't just put him in jail for 24 hours. When I came back at 2 o'clock, they told me I can't go home because the policeman left and I can't go home. And the other guy, they sent him home. When I came home, my mother didn't sleep, nobody slept. They said, how much money it is? You got him there? I said, no. There was, in German money, there was not so worth it like used to be worth it now. I said 150,000 marks. I didn't give him back. I didn't give him because I figured out I saved his life and he's going to save my life. In Munich, my mother took some money, went to the black market and bought some food, a little bit and this. And we had for about a year and a half how to survive. It was much easier. Then I was called by the police. If I saw that one policeman stole from another policeman the same money, I said, no, I didn't say nothing because it's war, you have to survive. My mother worried, she said, maybe I stole it from somebody, but really, no, I said, this would happen to both of them. And this was one episode that happened to me about this money.
Now that money allowed you to survive for a
about a year and a half, more or less. My mother bought some bacon, and she bought some bread in the black market. There was a big black market there. Even in jail, there's always a black market.
So you learned a skill while you were there. Then.
Yeah, you learn. Yeah, you learn. And then in ghetto, there was something else. There was not enough wood to cook. Even you get a very little food, but there's no wood, you're not allowed to bring it. Then I'm a little bit mechanically inclined, or a little bit good mechanically inclined. Then my father was a tailor, I had some scissors. Then I took some tin for what runs down the water, and I took it off, I broke it off, and I made a little oven. Only with 2 little pieces of wood, you're able to make a complete meal. Imagine this, I made some pipes, went around the house and then out. Then the same pipe, the smoke was hot and warmed up the room. And this, I made a few of them and I sold it on the black market. And I was able to buy some medicine for my brother. He needed sulfur, brontosil they call it. And it helped him. And
well,
this
then
way,
they shipped you to the other camp,
and
right?
then they said they need some, if we want to go to a different kind of concentration camp. In the same town, they call it Sunshine. This is by the railroad station, where the army used to be, or there was army. And we signed up. I said, maybe this can be much easier. In this concentration camp, there were different kind of barracks. In one barrack was women, in one barrack was men, and mothers, women and children, and men. And we lived separate. We saw each other when we came back from war. And then they asked, okay, I go back again from the ghetto. There was a young man, a friend of my sister, because his sister was my sister's friend. And they're supposed to send him someplace where they were afraid they're going to kill him. And they asked if he can stay with us for a couple of weeks or months, and he will stay with us till they find something where to send to different kind of camp. And my mother said, okay. And then I was the messenger, and I used to go, he had an uncle, was a shoemaker, fine shoemaker. And he used to fix shoes like black market again. And I used to bring him messages from his nephew to this guy. His name was Jaffe. And I saw the way he works as a shoemaker. And I looked and looked. I used to come home, I had a hammer, and I used to made a knife, and I was learning the way he does it. He didn't know about it. And believe it or not, it took me a month maybe. I started to fix shoes for myself. And when I went to Sunshine, now go back when they took concentration camp, they needed shoemakers. And there was maybe about 10 guys or 8 guys. And I signed up myself to I'm a shoemaker. Okay, they made some tables, sat down. He looks at everybody how they work. They said, what can I do? I started to do. He said, you're not a shoemaker. But there was a man, an older man. He said, why don't let this young man work with me? He didn't like to polish the shoes. He didn't like to paint the shoes. He said, let him do this work, and together we're going to produce more shoes. And he said, the German said, okay. Believe it or not, it didn't take too long that I became a good shoemaker. And I'm telling this story because there comes something further. When I became a shoemaker, and I was only then 13 years old, a young boy, a child, and they bought new machinery, but they used to glue the soles. And they called me for me to learn how to do it because they knew I can learn fast. And I became in charge of this machinery, and we used to make soles they used to ago, they called it, the glue. And I had a good position there. In the morning at 8 o'clock, when we came to work, we saw about 20 buses. The windows was with white painted windows. And there's some bunch of Germans come in, and they went to back where the children are, and they throw all the children in the buses, but about 10 or 8 buses. And I heard it, and I saw it. I said, uh-oh, now they're going to pick me up, me too. But the children crying, and the parents went to work. In the morning, they went to work in the factories outside the concentration camp. And they used to work. That was on the marched, like outside with guard, and they walked there. And when they came in back to see their children, and there was no children. It was panic because we had about, I think it was maybe about 3,000 or 4,000 children, and the parents didn't find the children. And it was so, some of them threw themselves to the electric chicken wire and got electrocuted. Some was panic. And then I said, I wish some bomb comes here from the Russians, because they're throwing bombs that are around Lithuania. And I like to get killed. I cannot take it anymore. But time, time goes away and you get a little bit more adjusted. But it broke all the people where they lost their children there. They were not the same already. Everything was so. And they took them to the same place where they killed other Jewish people on the 9th fort, and there they killed the children. And then the Russians started near to Lithuania again, because they are winning positions in the war. And one morning they told us to get ready. We're going to take you to Germany. And they came, picked us up. We marched to the railroad, and the railroad were completely for animals. And they put a bucket to make number 1 or number 2, and they filled us up. In each wagon was maybe about 40 or 50 people. But not a place even to sit down, because there was no place to sit on the way.
They moved your whole family?
Whole family.
Your grandfather had died?
My grandfather died many times. There was Sinel who died. And we were glad he died, because he suffered so much. And he didn't understand what's going on.
So now it's your mother, your sister,
yourself,
my brother. And your brother.
Yeah. And they took us there, and we filled up, and we know what's going to happen. We know they're going to kill us. It was, you don't believe what kind of position we were.
Well, unfortunately, we are out of time for tonight, but there is still much more to David's story, and we'll have the second part of this interview coming up next week. Until then, God bless.